You ain't never seen a black caveman. Period. I don't give a what history book you want to look into. I don't give a what research you want to do. We are the makers, the owners, the creams of the planet, the father of civilization and gods of the universe. We come from the richest parts of the planet. It's like when you go and look for a house to buy, right? You go and look at 10 cribs, 20 cribs until you find the best crib, not only for your comfort, but for your budget. Our nature didn't coincide with budget.
You are Nubian to us, you are Nubia. So to the Nubians, we are Egyptians because we are the new Egyptians.
The new Egyptians.
The Nubians are the native Egyptians.
The ancient,
They were
right?
the ones who built ancient Egypt.
Wow.
Who built the pyramids, who built ancient Egypt civilization, who invented Egypt, as I would say, were the Nubians.
It's strange how often people want to remove Egypt from Africa, but there's clear evidence that in the very early cultures in Upper Egypt, these had connections with Nubia and Africa to the south, and so, you know, we must not remove Egypt from Africa.
Agwan family, welcome back to my YouTube commentary. I hope you are doing okay. Now, personally, I think there is a hidden connection between ancient Egypt and modern black power. Not I think, but it is true. There is a hidden connection between ancient Egypt and modern black power. Okay? Now, they told us for centuries, they told us, or they told you, they told everyone that black power started in the 1960s. But the truth is, it began over 5,000 years ago. In the temple of Kemet, under the blazing sun of Africa's golden age, back then, that's when it started. And when Western historians tried to rewrite our history, they didn't just change the fact, but they attempted to disconnect a people from their spiritual source. Okay? And they took the brilliance of Kemet, they took the science, the spirituality, and Architecture, the mathematics of Kemet, the philosophy, and claimed that it was Egyptian in a European sense. And they detached it from Africa. Okay? But Kemet was Africa. The people were black. Their gods were a reflection of melanin, of the dark hue of the Nile soil, of the cosmic essence that connects heaven and earth. Okay? So when we talk about black power, when I mention black power, we must understand that it is not a new invention, but it is just a resurrection. It is the return of that same divine consciousness that built the pyramids without machines, that alignment temples with stars, that spoke in symbols of balance, order, and justice. It's called Maat. Okay? And Maat is not just a myth. Maat is the original moral code, the root of African ethics. That is what Marcus Garvey meant when he said, "Up, you mighty race, accomplish what you will." That is what Malcolm X felt when he said, "By any means necessary." It is what the Black Panthers lived when they said, "All power to the people." Okay? Because power, in its trust African form, was always spiritual first. Okay? Now, before I continue, I want you to watch this clip first, and then I'll come back with the more commentary.
We black people, we were the mothers of the Sumerian civilization. There is not a single word in Sumerian but has an exact equivalent in Africa. There is not a single word in ancient Egyptians but has an exact parallel in Africa. We came, and for example, they call the South, Zacharias Kimse repeatedly refers to the southern part of the world as the Abzu. And the truth, the right pronunciation is not Zoo, as in animal zoo. No, it's Zu. They pronounced the ZU as Zu. And that is an African word. If we say this person is very dark-skinned, we say umnyama Zu.
What I was showing him was this picture here of these statues that were found over in Egypt, Upper Egypt, of black men that were placed there or carved out of solid granite thousands of years ago. And if you notice, he didn't ever turn it toward the camera. He kept it down. Well, I started to turn it toward the camera, but I didn't. I was trying to be polite. And at that point. And but today in the Los Angeles Times on page 2, they have this same picture. You look in today's Los Angeles Sunday Times, and they have a story on page 2 about this temple over in Africa. They call it Egypt, but Egypt is in Africa. And the value of which is so tremendous, it points out how the United Nations is trying to float a loan of around $30 million to save this temple from being covered by the waters that will be brought up by this Aswan Dam that they're trying to build over there. And this thing is so shrewdly done that the average Negro will look at it and read it, and because it says Egypt, he never identifies it with him or him with it. It shows you how shrewd the white man is. But when all you have to do is look at the features of the thing, and you can see, brother, they got all the features that the white man says Negroes have. But because it is associated or connected with something of such value, archaeological and historic, anthropological value, the white man tries to steal it for himself and says, no, these are white people, these aren't black people. And look at this for yourself. Look closely at it, and then, and if you notice, you'll also read in there where the United States is on record as being against putting out the money necessary to save this archaeological wonder. They're against it. And it tells you in the paper that they're against it. They want to let it go on and go beneath the waves. There was a time when America would be for preserving something like that. Because in those days, the black man was so dead mentally, he could look right at it and wouldn't know he was looking at himself. He looked right at it and wouldn't know he was looking at himself. And today, when we see a black man, we know that's a black man. Whether they call him an Egyptian, a Re-Egyptian, or an Ab-Egyptian. Don't care what they call him. All you got, if he look like you, he's the same thing as you. And this man that they have here, brothers and sisters, it has nothing but the features of a pure black man. Also, they tell me that there's an exhibition going on in Los Angeles right now somewhere about King Tut. Where is that? Some kind of museum. Where is it? Exposition, where is it? Oh, Exposition Park. I saw King Tut's mummy, tomb, when I was in Egypt. And I don't know if they have the same one here, but if you go and see it, you'll find out that this King Tut, whose mummy or sarcophagus, whatever they call it, they have, it's as black as this board. And the white man knows this. Every picture that they have of King Tut, he's not brown. No, he is black, brother, just like this. And the black people who lived in that day had mastered science to such extent, had mastered chemistry to such extent that they could create colors that the dye hasn't faded to this day. Now you know this. The white man got to paint his house every year. You got to paint yours, inside and out. You haven't got a piece of cloth at home that won't fade if you put it in the sun. But yet these black people back there could make dye that has retained the color, same grade, quality, right down to the day from 5,000 and 6,000 years ago. They were master
White people?
Well, they call themselves both black people and African people. In fact, the name of the country itself means black people.
Egypt means black people?
Yes. See, the word Egypt is not in the language of the old Egyptians, or old, I prefer to say, Kemetic people at all. That name does not appear until Egypt is finished as a nation, and it's under the control of foreigners, namely Greeks. But if you look at the name that Egyptians wrote when they described themselves, they call themselves Kemites or Kemet, KMT, the phoneme KM and a T. And it has a little picture of two people besides the KMT, which is the way to make the meaning of a word clear. That's called a determinative. And you have a man and a woman showing both sexes, and then you have three little lines under it, which means plural. So that means men and women plural, and black men and women plural, and that means black people, which some Egyptologists have suggested means black dirt or black land because of the land around the riverbank. But the argument, the definitive argument on that, I think, has been presented by Dr. Cheikh Anta Diop, who died a couple years ago, and it was his work that, from the basis of linguistic and cultural analysis, showed that they were indeed referring to themselves as a black people. But there's more to it, because they not only referred to themselves as black people, they referred to themselves in all instances when talking of their origins as African. For example, their home, which they call the Holy Land, was south of Egypt. They call their home Ta-Neter or Ta-Neteru, which meant land of the gods. And they said they had come from upriver, going south, you go up. And so they had come from up south. And they said more specifically at the foothills of the Mountain of the Moon, where the god Hapi dwells.
Now, there are 2 mountains of the moon, is that correct?
There may even be 3. There would be at least, the 2 would be Mount Kilimanjaro,
which is in Kenya.
In Kiswahili, that means Mountain of the Moon, from Kenya. But also Mount Rwenzori, which is in Uganda, on the other side of Lake Victoria or Lake Nyanza. That is also sometimes referred to as Mountain of the Moon. And that is at the source of the White Nile, which would be consistent with the description of the Egyptians, on the equator of where they came from. There's also a Blue Nile, which starts at Lake Tana in Ethiopia, and there are mountains around that lake as well, which are also sometimes called Mountain of the Moon. So in either case, the source of the Nile, White or Blue Nile, would be deep in Central Africa and would be where black people have always resided.
To some of you, Dr. Hilliard's arguments seem outrageous, but traditional Oxford and Cambridge-trained Egyptologist Dr. Gay Robbins doesn't think so. She supports some, but not all, of Dr. Hilliard's statements. For example, she uses these words to describe the people who built the pyramids.
They're an African people. It's strange how often people want to remove Egypt from Africa, but there's clear evidence that in the very early cultures in Upper Egypt, these had connections with Nubia and Africa to the south, and so, you know, we must not remove Egypt from Africa.
Let's talk about a very well-known Egyptian figure, the Sphinx. When you turn to the side, what do you see?
You want me to say that it looks black from the side?
I want you to say what you see from the side.
What you see from the side is a face that's very battered with a broken nose. I think it's difficult to say. Obviously, it's not a typical European. It's not what we would think of as a typical Semite, but that may be because the nose is gone. Wow. But these racial questions are very, very difficult.
Why would you say that?
Oh, because it started last century, and it started with a school of thought that wanted to see the Egyptians as the beginning of all civilization, but who didn't want to think that blacks could have anything to do with this. And so they adopted the Egyptians as honorary whites. They called their land Kemet, that's perfectly true, and it means the black land, because when the Nile flooded every year, it spread black silt across the land, and so they contrasted the black land of the cultivated land either side of the Nile with the red land of the desert. Okay. And black was therefore good color, and the red of the desert was associated with the god of chaos, the god Set.
Doctors Hilliard and Robbins disagree on one point, and that's the amount of physical evidence we have today. Dr. Robbins says most of the mummies and bodies we see come from late Egyptian dynasties. In some cases, she says, they come even after the dynastic period had ended. Dr. Hilliard agrees with that. He says the mummies we see, such as the one here, come from a period when Egypt had ended as a cultural and political nation and was controlled by foreigners, namely the Greeks and Romans. But he also says we have clear evidence from the ancient Kemites about what they look like and with what racial group they aligned themselves.
The people who are presently in Egypt are people who came in large numbers from Asia around the time of Muhammad with the spread of Islam. You had a massive immigration into the Nile Valley of Arabic people, Arabic-speaking, Arabic culture people, who mixed with the African population that had been there for thousands of years, the remnants of whom are Nubians, and they look the same now as they did then, especially around the southern part of the country near Aswan. So people are confused, you know, when you look at the present-day Egyptian population and you try to project back in time to the time of the pyramids and what have you. These indeed are different people, and we could show you that on the timeline.
Dr. Hilliard's timeline traces roughly 5,000 years of continuous Kemetic history. What's astounding is the amount of history which takes place before the Greeks and Romans invaded the country. Hilliard speculates that the Egyptian civilization as we know it may have existed several thousand years before the unification of the country. We say unification because there are south and north parts to ancient Egypt. This person brought those two segments together and began the first Egyptian dynasty.
Mina is probably as close to what we think of in stereotype form of a black person as you can get. He was the first king who pulled this country together in Dynasty 1. What we call the hieroglyphics were already in place here. In fact, this line is an important line. This shows how long the ancient Egyptians stayed the same in their way of life. That's why we call this cultural Kemet.
How many years are we talking about?
Now this line, as you can see on the chart, is more than 3,000 years long. But it's actually longer than that. In other words, we don't have a chart long enough to show how far back in history this line goes. So there was a culture in the Nile Valley before Egypt became a nation, before Kemet became a nation. And what Mina did was to take what was called the North and the South, which had rulers, and put those two parts of the country together, uniting the two lands.
Thus creating what we know as
Thus
Egypt.
creating Ta-Meri, the beloved land, or the two lands, which we now know as Egypt. There are two stories on the age of the Sphinx. There's one story that has the Sphinx as the face of the pharaoh who built this middle pyramid in Giza. This represents the three pyramids of Giza. There are more pyramids in that, but this represents that particular pyramid by Pharaoh Ka-Afre. However, I believe the best evidence shows, as John Jackson shows in his book, Man, God, and Civilization and African Origin of the Introduction to African Civilization, that the Sphinx, or Horemakhet, which is his real name, should be dated somewhere back here, off the chart, about 10,000 years ago. And regardless, it's still the face of a native black African person.
And obviously created by a civilization with really high technical skill.
To sculpt in 3 dimensions a perfect face, which is what the you would have to say Horemakhet or the Sphinx is, would definitely suggest very technical antecedents, because after all, this is an incredibly long monument. You know, it's almost like 100 yards long. The monument is carved out of a solid piece of stone, so you have this relief figure carved in stone, and it's still standing. You know, now that the combination of things suggests a real level of technical understanding of material.
So even though science refuses to give credit to melanin and all that it does, it constantly names things after darkness or after blackness over and over again. Even when you go in the brain, you find like Amun's horns and things like that. So if you don't find blackness, then you find cultural references to our history, you know. And I noticed that you speak a lot of the parallels between Kemet and our culture along with melanin. Did you want to expound on some of those?
Well,
the reality is, you say I laid the groundwork maybe for the contemporary times, but there's no way that I can, or we say that we are the creators and the builders and the only ones that ever knew. We know that our ancient African ancestors were dissecting the brain because they mummified bodies. They had canopic jars where they put in organs. So we know they were cutting up the body and seeing things. So when you actually slice the brain and look at it from the side, it's the sagittal section of the brain, and you start to see images, you start to see exactly where that third eye image comes from. When you see the third eye, the eye of Haru, you see the image of like a long slant, and you see a little spot in the middle. That's really the thalamus, which is the dead center of the brain. And you see when you go down to this little bump, that's like the pons. So wow, here they are looking at that. And so they were studying this a long time ago. Right. So if you look at the tops of the pyramids, the capstones are black.
The Ben stone, right?
How to get it way up there, and why does it happen to be black? Because it's channeling that energy. So they understood these principles, in my opinion, way back then. It's a matter of how do we now dissect it to make it understandable today, to make it relevant to our lives. Right. I mean, I don't think they really had too much of a problem with the issue of blackness and lightness and color. They weren't into all that back then. They were just the people that lived in that land. They called themselves Kemites. So land of the blacks, they say, well, not because the soil was black, but because the people were black.
Exactly.
If you go there today and you see how hot it is, you know darn well there couldn't be light-skinned people or melanin recessive people building that. It's too hot. No. You have to have something protecting you to keep you able to work in that kind of environment. So I believe they really understood the power of blackness way back then. We're now just trying to regenerate it to make it relevant today, because we've been told to hate ourselves. I mean, that self-hate is devastating.
Now, welcome back. Before the name Egypt, before the name Pharaoh or civilized, there was Kemet. Okay? There was Kemet. And Kemet meaning is the land of black people. This was the spiritual headquarters of African world. Every kingdom that rose later, Nubia, Ethiopia, Mali, Songhai, Benin, carried pieces of that sacred legacy. So, in Kemet, education was not just about reading scrolls, but it was about knowing self. The temple walls weren't just art, they were lessons. They taught that the divine lives within you, okay? And that man and woman are reflections of God, and that the highest purpose of life is to align the soul with truth, is to align the soul with balance, is to align the soul with cosmic order. Okay? Now, I want you to think this. Doesn't that sound exactly like what the modern Black Power movement stood for? You know, self-knowledge, self-respect, and self-determination. The Kemet priest said, "Know thyself and you will know the God." Know yourself and you will know the God. And 5,000 years later, Malcolm X echoed this: a man who knows his history is a man who knows himself. A man who knows his identity is a man who knows himself. These are different words, but same spirit. Okay? When you fast forward 1,000 years later, the spirit of Kemet reawakened on the streets of Harlem, on the streets of New York, on the streets of Nairobi, you know, the beating heart of the Black Renaissance. When Garvey preached unity, his message echoed the ancient call of African sovereignty. His movement, red, black, and green flag, carried the same energy as the colors of Kemet. Red for the blood of the people, black for the skin, and green for the land. When Elijah Muhammad built the nation of Islam, he reintroduced the same sacred principle that the God is not an image of whiteness, but dwells within the black man and woman. That same divine reflection of Ra, the sun God, lives in our melanin, lives in our energy, in our vibration. And when young revolutionaries like Newton and Angela Davis rose up, the militance wasn't chaos. It was cosmic order fighting against imbalance. Mahat returning in modern form. You see, Kemet never died. It went underground. It hid in our churches. It hid on our music. It hid on our rhythm, on our fashion, on our names, on our rebellion. And right now, the resurfacing of Kemet, it is resurfacing through a generation, rediscovering its origin. Okay? Now, let me break something powerful, the Kemetic blueprint for power. The Kemetic civilization wasn't just about pyramids, but it was about systems. Spiritual systems, educational systems, economic systems. And that's exactly what the modern Black Power movement tried to rebuild. Okay? The ancient pharaohs taught Eka the science of word power. It taught Heka the science of the vibration, science of manifestation. In Kemet, words were energy. Okay? Just to speak was to create. And that's why in today's world, when we say Black Power, we are not just chanting. We are invoking. We are activating an ancient frequency that once ruled the earth. Okay? The same Heka lives in our gospel choirs. The same Heka lives in our hip hop, lives in our speeches, lives in our party. When Shakur Tupac once said this, you gotta make a change, he was speaking Heka. Okay? When Lauryn Hill said, how you gonna win when you ain't right within, she was echoing my heart. So we are modern Kemites. We are modern Kemites walking in digital times. Okay? If you believe in reincarnation, we just reincarnated. Reincarnated Maat, Kemet. Now, why did you think colonizers fear Kemet so much? There is a war against black mind. Why? This is because Kemet proved that black people are not slaves. We are the architects of civilization itself. Okay? So, to destroy black power, they had to destroy memory. So they turned our gods into pagan idols. They turned our science into mythology. They made our pyramids look like mysteries instead of engineered marvels. You know? But you can't kill what is in the blood. You can't bury what is in the soul. And that's why every time black people rise from Haiti to Harlem, Soweto, Nairobi, we repeat the same divine pattern. Liberation, balance, justice, and spiritual awakening. So every generation of black resistance is a reincarnation of Kemet. So we are the children of those who build monuments to eternity. We are the children of all those who build Great Zimbabwe. We are the children of all those build pyramids. Okay? And there is a return of the sun, people. Look around today, from Ghana to Atlanta, Nairobi, all the way to Kingston, Jamaica. There is a new awakening. A global movement of melanin rising, on consciousness returning. Right now we are learning the hieroglyphs again. We are wearing anchors again. We are studying astrology, African spirituality, meditation. We are studying cosmic again. Yeah? We are just realizing that the third eye they mocked was the eye of Heros. And we are no longer ashamed of being African. We are proud that that's the same spiritual evolution that happened in ancient Kemet when they said rise as Ra rises. Okay? Because Ra, the sun, was not just a god. It was a symbol of awakening. And today, that awakening is global. Black power is not just hating anyone. It's about remembering who we are. It's about realigning with the oldest truth known to man. You know, that the black race is the foundation of civilization and the guardian of divine order of earth. So we are remembering. we are realizing, we are reconnecting. And there's a sense of melanin that, melanin and divine energy that they're trying to hide from us, because the Kemetic technology hidden the modern black power, okay? Because ancient Kemetic priests called it Ka. Ka means the life force, the divine energy that animates all things. They knew that what we call melanin today wasn't just about color. It was a spiritual conductor, a cosmic antenna that connects humanity to the creator. Okay? The temples of Kemet were built around the principle of the darker the who, the closer to the source. So this wasn't racism. It was recognition of universal energy. And today, modern scientists are finally catching up. They are calling melanin it's called what? Superconductor of light, superconductor of sound and heat. It absorbs energy and transforms it. It's why we thrive under the sun that others fear. It is why rhythm, creativity, intuition, and resilience flow naturally through us. So when you see black people rising, when you see black people organizing, when you see black people creating and leading, it is not new. It is ancestral technology reactivated. And melanin is not just skin. Melanin is the physical expression of divine consciousness. Okay? And that's why every moment of black power, there is always a spiritual undertone. It's not just politics. It is prophecy. Okay? Now, let me talk about how Kemet used energy of power and balance. Okay? In the temple of Luxor, priests taught that the body is the microscope of the universe. Okay? Every organ, every cell, every breath echoed the balance of the cosmos. They meditated not for relaxation, but for alignment. They understood frequency, that your thoughts, emotions, and words shape reality. And that's why when we say black power, it resonates, because it is not just speech. Black power is a vibration. So the Kemetic masters aligned themselves with the cosmic order, symbolizing by the goddess Maat. Okay? And it was symbolizing justice, truth, harmony. And to live in Maat was to live in power. And that is the same principle reappears in every modern liberation movement. The call of justice in the streets, the fight of balance in economies, the demand of equality in the law, the awakening of the self-respect in identity, that is Maat in motion. That is Maat in motion. Through the voices of the generations rediscovering its divine structure. Okay? And Ra, the sun god, represented illumination. Meaning the internal light that conquers darkness. But in ancient teachings, Ra wasn't a person. Ra was the symbol of awakening. Ra was the spark of consciousness that lived within all. Okay? When the Black Partners, or when the Black Panthers said that return to their... Black Panthers said all power belonged to the people. That was Ra speaking through them. When Marcus Garvey told Africans that return to their glory, that was Ra returning to the Garvey's fire, through the Garvey's fire. When the youth of today say, stay woke, they are unknowingly echoing some Kemetic command, which is awaken Ra within. Okay? The struggle has always been between light and ignorance. Ra is light, Ra is truth, Ra is the internal awakening of black consciousness. And that's why no matter how much oppression, how much colonization or propaganda tries to bury us, the light keeps breaking through, because you can't destroy the sun. Okay? You cannot. Now, to the ancient, it represented the pineal gland, okay? The seat of the soul. It was the third eye. It was the inner vision that sees beyond illusion. Okay? When both hemispheres of the brain unite, the eye opens, and that's alignment. So today, when black consciousness speaks of waking up, seeing through the lies, decoding the system, that is the eye of Horus reopening after centuries of sleep. When Malcolm X said the media is the most powerful entity on earth because it controls the mind of the masses, he was describing how the system blinds the eye. When black people reclaim their own narrative through music, through YT, through blogs, through books or art, they are reactivating the eye of Horus. This is not a coincidence that so many revolution movements adapt that simple. So it's not a coincidence. It is the ultimate reminder that you are not blind. You are ancestors, or your ancestors gave you divine align. Your ancestors gave you divine sight. Okay? So we cannot speak of Kemet of black power without honoring the divine life feminine. Okay? There is this called Isis or Oshet. This was not just a goddess. She was the principle of returning power, returning restoration, and returning wisdom. Okay? She resurrected Osiris, she birthed Horus, and she symbolized the power of creation through love and balance. So black women today carry to the same energy. This is the energy of rebuilding what has been broken. Okay? After Harry Tubman to Asata Shakur, from Queen Nani to Angela Davis, from contemporary voices of mothers holding families together, that's a Sot energy reborn. Okay? And that's why in every revolution, black women are always at the center. They're always guiding, they're always healing, they're always protecting and awakening. They are the original keepers of Maat. Okay? So when we say black power, it must always include her, the mother, the goddess, and the builder of nations. Now, everywhere you look around right now, people are wearing the anchor, but if you truly understand it, the anchor is not just a cross with a logo. It is the symbol of internal life, of balance between masculine and feminine, heaven and earth, creation and continuity. Okay? So in Kemet, priests carried it as a reminder that life is divine and unending. And in the modern world, it represents the rebirth of consciousness, the knowing that black race is not dead, merely transforming. Okay? And I'll say this. In Kemet, they wrote in symbols. Each gleam carried vibration, sound, and hidden meaning. Okay? The language wasn't just written, but it was alive. Fast forward to today, what we are doing on social media, we are communicating through symbols again. Fist raised in emoji, anchors, suns, eyes. So these are modern hieroglyphs carrying energy across digital walls. Okay? Now, I will say this. When we say black excellence, Black Lives Matters, stay woke, those are in incarnations, spells of empowerment, awakening, frequencies that cross borders and minds. And this is how ancestors now speak through Wi-Fi and pixels, all these things. So don't underestimate your hashtag. They are your hieroglyphs reborn. And Kemet has gone digital. So we are here. There's a hidden reason they fear the concept of black world. You know, that's why they are writing textbook. That's why they control the media. That's why they mock African spirituality. But at the end of the day, black people are rising up, and we are rising up too big. Okay? I have a lot to say about this video, but let's finish here. Until next episode, peace out.